Hello and good afternoon, good morning or good evening, wherever you are. I welcome you to our ISTA webinar today on seed science and technology. And I've got with me Dr. Fiona Hay, who is editor-in-chief of the ISTA Scientific Journal. This meeting will be recorded and it will be broadcasted on the ISTA YouTube channel. You can have a look later on it again, and we will also publish on the newsletter and the ISTA social media platforms when this recording will be available for you. If you have any questions which can be put in and answered at the end of this short webinar, then please use the question and answer box on your panel. You will find it, I think, under questions in the attendee panel. Thank you very much first. And now, Fiona, could you tell us something about you and introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, good morning, evening, afternoon. Where to start? I'm currently a senior scientist in the Seed Science and Technology group of the Department of Agroecology at Aarhus University in Denmark. I've been researching in seeds all my career, and I actually became interested in seeds when I was at school, and then that took me to the University of Manchester in England, where I'm from, to read applied plant science. And it was while I was actually studying for my undergraduate degree. I was in the, it was one summer holiday actually, I was in the university library in my local hometown. And I remember looking along the shelves and coming across Seed Science and Technology and picking it off the shelf and looking at it and thinking, wow, there's a journal just on seeds. And of course, I had no idea then that I might one day be the editor of this journal. My degree had a year out in industry, and I asked to go to the Seed Conservation Department of the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew, and luckily that was possible, and I did. I ended up staying for my PhD, and as I was finishing my PhD, the Millennium Seed Bank project was starting. So again, I was very lucky to be able to stay on and continue my research on mainly on seed longevity, but also solving germination problems and things for the seed bank. In 2009, I moved to the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines. There I was working for the Gene Bank, and it was while I was there in 2011 that I was asked to take on the role of Chief Editor of Seed Science and Technology, which I gladly did. And then moved here to Denmark in 2018. I think one of the other things I'll just add to that is, you know, I am still actively researching and writing papers myself, and I think that's quite a good thing for an editor to be on both sides of the publishing process, you know, seeing it from both angles. That's me.
Yeah, thank you very much. You said you're chief editor of Seed Science and Technology. Can you tell us a little bit about seed science and technology in general?
Yep. So it's a very specialized journal. So it's in the title, Seed Science and Technology. So very specialized within the agricultural domain, which is obviously very much broader. Our scope is seed quality and physiology, and that's related to seed production, harvest, processing, distribution, testing. And in testing, we're talking about dormancy and germination, perhaps also, and we get a lot of papers on dormancy and germination, but also testing in terms of vigor testing, seed health testing, purity testing, and so on. It's a long-standing journal. I think we'll come later on to talking about the 50th issue, which will be 50th volume, which will be next year. So it is a long-standing journal, and I think it has quite a good reputation. for seed scientists in particular, of course. And it's also, you know, ISTA has a purpose. Part of its purpose is to disseminate science and promote science. So, you know, the journal is very important to ISTA from that perspective.
Is an important part in the dissemination of knowledge of ISTA concerning seed science, seed technology. Can you tell us something about the changes at Seed Science and Technology over the recent years since you took over?
Yeah. So there have been, I think, 3 big ones. One of the biggest things we did was to change over from an email system to an online editorial management system. So when I first took over in 2011, everything was done through email. So all the submissions were made by email. And the whole of the review process was done through email. And then we had an Excel sheet which we used to track, you know, every paper to see where it was in the process. And we were receiving about 250 submissions every year. So you can imagine that was quite a large bit of work in itself, just managing all that process, you know, quite a lot of admin involved in that. So transferring to, we use Editorial Manager. So that was a big help in terms of managing all the workflow. So people submit their paper through Editorial Manager, and then we pick it up and we send it out to reviewers through the system. And then at the very end, if a paper gets accepted, it's also through Editorial Manager that we pass it on to Lucy, who's the person that does the layout for the journal, for the papers. So that was a big improvement for us. One of the other things we did was to introduce DOIs for SST papers. So DOIs are digital, it stands for Digital Object Identifiers. So it's a unique code that is given for each paper. And it's very important for cross-referencing and making sure that people can find articles. So for instance, at the moment, SST is hosted on Ingenta Connect. So if you want to read any papers from Seed Science and Technology at the moment, you go to Ingenta Connect and you'll see the papers there. And we have electronic articles there going back to 2003, and they all have their DOIs. But it means that if we were to ever change the host where we had the papers, ISTA would just have to change the metadata, and we wouldn't actually change that DOI code. So that stays fixed, and people will still be able to get to the papers by using that code. So the metadata is updated with the new link, but the DOI code stays the same. So that was another big step forward, really, for the journal. And then another.
Since when does ISTA have these DOI codes introduced?
So I started in 2011, and I think we did it maybe a couple of years after I had started. But all the papers that are available electronically on Ingenta Connect, they all have their DOI. So going back to 2003. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I can give to our colleagues outside also the information that also the volumes before 2003 are now all available electronically from volume 1 onwards. And they are all scanned and available via the Secretariat of ISTA. Just as a side information, we discussed that previously if we should do it, Fiona, but they're all available now, which is also a great advantage for us. They're not that much asked, but 1 or 2 times a year, people are approaching the Secretariat for an older version of SST. So yeah. Available also electronically, but you have to contact the Secretariat. Sorry,
That's all right. And they don't have DOIs either, do they? So.
No, not yet, and will probably not have.
Yes. So the other big change was in 2018 when we became an open access journal. And we saw this as being important because more scientists are expected to publish their work, especially if they receive public funding. They're expected to publish their work in an open access journal. So we took the decision to become a fully open access journal. And so the papers now, going back to 2018, they're available freely for anybody to read without making any payment. So there's no paywall there. So that was another big thing. There's been smaller things as well, of course. And quite recently we introduced an editorial article for each compiled virtual issue. So this is just an article written by somebody who's, a bit of an expert or a senior in the field, and they just kind of do a sort of a commentary on the issues, the articles that are in each issue, and we did that partly to try and just promote the journal. And I usually ask somebody from the editorial board or somebody from perhaps an outside organisation. So, for example, last year I asked Henk Hilhorst to write one of the editorials, and he's the current president of the International Society for Seed Science. So he gladly did that for us. The other thing I would say, in terms of making these sorts of changes, is that we have always had a lot of support from the ECOM, the ISTA's ECOM, and from the Secretariat in terms of introducing these changes. So, as the editor, that's been very nice for me.
Yeah, you talked about editing. There's an editorial board also of the Seed Science and Technology Journal. How does that operate? What's the task of the board?
Yep. So the editorial board it's very different compared with the other ISTA technical committees. And that's because, a lot of the work that we do is quite routine. So we don't have a program of work in the same way that the other technical committees have. We're currently on the board, there's 21. Somebody is just leaving because they're retiring, so we'll be down to 20. And most people on the board are active researchers in seed science and publishing themselves, writing papers themselves. Alison Powell is the deputy editor, and she usually handles papers for me, perhaps if I'm having a break, or if there's a conflict of interest with me handling a paper. So the most common one being if I'm co-author of a paper submitted to SST. So then Alison would handle that for me. And the main role of the editorial board then is to participate in the review process. So typically I send papers out to 2 reviewers, and I prioritize members of the editorial board for reviewing. So they might handle maybe review 5 or 6 papers a year, depending on what we get coming in. So sometimes we get a flood of papers on seed health, say, and then there'll be a long gap before we get any more. So it does, it does vary the sort of workflow for particular reviewers. And then I tend to ask other people to also review the papers as well. So most papers are reviewed by 2 reviewers, and often one will be from the editorial board. Not always, but often. And then otherwise, when we have the annual meetings, the people that attend the annual meetings will try and have a get together and just discuss how the journal's doing. And of course, we correspond by email as well.
Yeah, thank you on that, sharing that knowledge with us. Very interesting. But what do I need to do when I want to publish on SST beside having done scientific work which can be published?
And then writing. Yeah, so when you start the writing process, and hopefully you'll be already thinking of Seed Science and Technology as a journal for you. the most important thing is to read the instructions. So they're available on the ISTA website, and that really is the most important thing. You know, it'll tell you how to structure the paper, how to format the paper, how to write the references, all that kind of thing. And actually, I can add to that is that one of the first things that I do when I receive a paper through Editorial Manager, I have to do what's called a technical check. And it's some of those things that I'm looking for when I'm doing that technical check to make sure that it is formatted properly. On the ISTA website, where you see all the instructions to authors, you can also find the link to Editorial Manager to actually make your submission. And then you just have to log into the system or create a new you know, username and password to get going in the system, and then upload the files. So usually Word files. You can submit as one whole file or separate files. You know, that's all quite easy within the system. What else? Yeah, so
Yeah,
write
there
it
are
and submit
probably
it.
also fees for publication.
Yes, yeah. So so now we're open access. We have open access publication charges, and we've tried to keep them quite low. So it's 625 Swiss francs for a research note. So these tend to be shorter papers, and they don't have the traditional separation of the different sections. It's just a continuous narrative which describes the work that was done. And there's a word limit to that, and you can only have 2 figures or tables. I'm a bit flexible about that, but you know, it's supposed to be basically quite a compact paper. So that's research notes, 625 Swiss francs, and then for a full-length paper, which you know can be as long as you like within good reason, as many figures and tables as you want. It has to have separate introduction, methods, results, and discussion sections. And that then the publication fee for that is 1,250 Swiss francs. So 1,250, yeah.
Which
Yeah, so be
apply
prepared to pay that.
for non-members, I know.
Yes.
Inside the membership, except associate members, it is included in your membership fee that you can publish on SST freely, which
Yeah.
is probably a benefit also for scientists to join the association and
Yeah, and
other.
also the members of the technical committees, they also
Yes.
have the fee waived. Yeah.
So that is also, we could call it a goodie for their work, which they are doing for ISTA, also if they are not personal members of the association. I can imagine that there are frequently made mistakes also in submission of papers. Well, you want to share 1 or 2 or 3 of them with us to give the audience an idea what they should avoid in
Yeah.
mistakes.
So one of the things that I don't appreciate is actually when tables and figures are embedded in the main text. So they should be submitted separately, and that can either be at the end of the main file or it can be submitted as separate files. But people more often are putting them in the main text. So, you know, I find for me, it's, you know, if I'm reviewing a paper, I like to be able to read and then look at the figure separately and really sort of study it. So that's the reason behind that. Now, at the technical check stage, you know, if the paper is otherwise okay, I probably wouldn't fail the technical check because of that. But it is something which I don't appreciate too much. And another problem sometimes, and it's to do with communicating the science really, and making it digestible, if you like. But sometimes people will submit papers which have lots of large tables and no figures. And I think it's a good idea to think how the paper will look at the end, and to make it visibly attractive, and people want to read it. And I tend to think that figures help with that. Again, I don't usually reject a paper for this, but a common mistake is not to put enough detail in the methods. So when we're writing a scientific paper, ultimately we want somebody else to be able to repeat the experiments. And if there's not enough detail there, or perhaps even not enough detail for a reviewer to understand what's been done, so that's another sort of quite common failure that we see. And then there's things like the wrong graph type, perhaps. So sometimes people plot data as if it's a continuous variable when actually it's categorical. So it might be, let's say, different genotypes or something, and they've joined lines between the genotypes, and you kind of think, well, there's no relationship between these genotypes that means it should be like that. So it's things like that which I tend to pick up on quite frequently.
Yeah, thank you very much on these experiences. I have to underline a little bit as well that materials and methods are often underestimated, but if your paper should be used later on, and also years later, when that is maybe difficult to find you internationally, because you either retired or you went to a different organization, different university. It is often good to have that very accurate, because you don't know what your paper can serve afterwards. And the more details you have in that area, that can be helpful if others would like to use your method and cite your paper in a correct way. We had that in areas like chemical registration in Europe just a few years ago, when papers were ranked and scored with a Cleamish scoring, if it can be followed up or not. So your paper is downgraded in that case if it is not professional, if it's not complete in this materials and methods. That means that it is not usable by the scientific or regulatory community later on. So yes, take special care about that, I would say. That is probably a very good advice. Now you started to tell us something, that it is an old journal, and you said we will come probably back to a question on 50 years, which is 2022 next year. So can you share your ideas what we can expect from SST next year?
Yep, so it'll be the 50th volume of Seed Science Technology in its current format. So I believe there was a forerunner before it became Seed Science and Technology. So we thought we would celebrate by having a special issue of the journal. And this is something that we've discussed among the editorial board. And I think what seems to be most likely at the moment is that we'll have a special issue where we ask people to, we'll pick out papers from past volumes, from volumes going back to the 70s or 80s or 90s or something, which have had the most impact, if you like, or been highly cited. And we'll see if we can get somebody to write a review of where the science has gone since the paper was published, and give it, put it into the context of where the science is today. And often in science we sometimes forget what was done originally, and then it gets sort of recycled, and people return and do experiments that were done many years ago. So we'd like to try and sort of avoid that by making sure people are aware of some of the older literature. So that's the plan at the moment, to have a special issue which will be open access, of course, and invited contributions. Yeah.
So looking back at the history of the journal as well, and probably also looking a little bit into the future. We talked about 50 years now. If you have your 50th birthday, you always get the remark on your next 50 years, but what will be the challenge of the future for SST?
Well, as a niche journal, it is hard for us to get a high impact factor, and I think that will always be difficult. You know, we're not always the first choice for authors, and that's because there are lots of other journals now, lots and lots of other journals, and they have broader scope, and it's basically easier for them to get a higher impact factor. But I like to think that one of the ways in which we can compete, if you like, is the sort of, we're a bit more personal in how we do things. So as editor, for example, you know, I look really quite carefully at every paper, you know, especially before they're accepted. You know, I do go through each paper very thoroughly to make sure everything makes sense, and to try and make sure that the science is communicated as well as possible. I think what we see in general now is you know, and maybe some of the bigger publishers in particular, but they're seeing how they can engage scientists more and make the whole publishing process a bit more collaborative and transparent. You know, so you see this perhaps in, you know, the publishing of preprints and the publishing of reviews and open commentary on papers and so on. So I don't know if these are some things that we might consider in the nearer future. I think I would prefer to think more about, you know, the engagement with the scientists and promoting the articles through that. I think above all, you know, it's important to remember that Seed Science and Technology, it is ISTA's journal, and it's important that it serves the needs of ISTA and its members. And I hope that seed scientists, other scientists, but particularly those with a connection to ISTA, I hope they, you know, continue reading the articles that we publish and continue submitting papers to Seed Science and Technology, because, you know, it's really dependent on that we have the journal, that we get the articles submitted. Yeah, so I think there are going to be challenges, but also opportunities.
Thank you, Fiona. I would like to invite our attendees here to put in questions, maybe more questions. We have one question here from Dr. Yalamal, asking, why can't ISTA collaborate with publishers like Elsevier, Springer, Nature, with hybrid options for open access as well as paywall for those who cannot afford open access fees? ISTA can save a lot of money payable to Ingenta Connect and software like Editorial Manager. Accounting with larger publishers may increase the visibility of the journal and ultimately the impact factor. I think you mentioned a few things about that before, but Fiona.
Oh, I thought you might answer that because of the financial implications.
I can answer on the financial, but
Yeah.
maybe the other thing.
We have been approached sometimes by larger publishers to see if we would like our journal, Seed Science and Technology, to go into their fold, if you like, and we've always avoided that because you know, we keep it as, if we keep it as ISTA's journal, then we're totally in charge and we manage it totally ourselves. So that's why, and then we've also, you know, there are other ways that we can promote it, and to keep that sort of personal interaction with our scientists. Yeah, do you want to add something about the financial side,
Yeah, let
Andreas?
me add something about the financial. Generally, we have to say we don't have that much payable to Ingenta Connect and the editorial manager software. It is more work which is done in-house and which needs to be covered here. And probably also part the work of the editor-in-chief, which is a position inside ISTA. We have to say it's a fixed position, and it is we're partly member of the staff, Fiona, if I want to say it like that. But we are renting you from Aarhus University and before from Erie. That is most of the work which is necessary, and for that we need someone who is responsible for it. You're mentioning the open access fees and that they can be quite high. They are probably in a way, but as you said, people are forced to publish in open access more and more their scientific work. And that is something which you need to bear in mind when you prepare your budget, that there must be some money left over also for the publication. And that is something we would like to add from the financial part of it.
I think most funders now do expect to pay something towards open access publication fee. Many funders, yeah.
Hey, there's a question for research notes. It has a limit of 2 tables / figures. Is it okay to have multiple sub-figures in a figure?
Yes. Yes, but not as a way to cheat the system, if you like. So yes, so a figure could be a composite figure with different graphs or something, as long as there's a good connection between them. So there's a good reason why they should be one figure rather than separate figures. But yes, that would be okay.
Thank you. I've got no more questions here. I might come back to the point again there on how the journal was run in the past. Before we went to open access, we were going much below 100 people or organizations who were registered to get the copies or buy the copies. So that was another thing. We did not generate a lot of income out of it. So to go to open access brought us to a wider audience than we had it before. And that was another reason to go for open access. And now your scientific work is available for free to everybody. That is also a good thing. To stay not with a big publishing house, but with Ingenta Connect has for us also advantages because we can bear all the copyrights and things like that much easier than with going to a big publishing house. That is what you mentioned as ISTA is keeping it as an ISTA journal, and we would like to keep it as an ISTA journal. So costings are about per year, you can see the figures in the budget of 50,000 Swiss francs, and the income is around 25 to 30,000. So ISTA is subsidizing it a little bit, but that is going out of the point that ISTA has in its strategic requirements, also the obligation to disseminate knowledge, and SST is playing an eminent role in this respect for disseminating the knowledge of seed science and technology. And for us, it is good to have our own journal. We are a niche journal. That's what you mentioned in the beginning as well. You were when you were a student, you said, oh, they have a journal on seeds, especially. So yes, and I'm not sure if the big publication houses would really like to have that as a niche journal when they have other bigger journals in their area. So we want to keep it as a ISTA publication, and we are looking forward to what is coming up in 2022 for the 50 years of SST. I hand back to you, Fiona, if you have any more questions or if you have any more things to be mentioned to our audience here.
I don't think so. Just I look forward to receiving submissions. Yeah, and remember that you can find all the necessary links on the ISTA website, so it should be quite easy to find all of those.
You find also the link to Fiona herself, and if you have other questions, or there was another question coming on. Special issue of SST exclusively devoted to special topics. Subject matter will help the seed personnel to get the maximum of the topic in one consolidated manner. Please consider. We will inform everybody via the ISTA newsletter and social media accounts on these things. We started to do so, but we will continue that these things are brought out to the audience. And if you have not registered to the ISTA newsletter yet, you can do that on the website, where you also can find under technical committees Seed Science and Technology Editorial Board and the details of Fiona Hay. Anything to be added? I thank you very much, Fiona. Fiona as the chief editor of SST, and thank you to the audience for your questions. You're welcome to ask more when you contact us directly. Thank you for this nice webinar and short webinar. There's another thing now coming in. Are there plans to increase the number of issues of SST? So maybe as a last answer, no. Okay, I think it's 3 volumes a year, but all articles are also on a fast track, I think, when they come in.
Yeah.
So no matter when it is published, your article will be available very even before the issue is going to be put together.
Yeah.
Thank you again. I don't see anything else popping up here. So have a good day wherever you are. And if you have further questions, just visit us on the ISTA website, www.seedtest.org. You can find this as a summary and a recording also on YouTube channel, and follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter for more information. Thanks, Fiona, for the nice talk, and to all of you outside, thank you very much and take care. And especially in these times of COVID-19, take special care when you're out. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.